first blade came from behind. He spun around, grabbed the attacker's arm, pulled the knife away. "What is this?" Then the second blade hit him. From the side, he stumbled. The third, the fourth, the fifth. He was surrounded, dozens of men, all holding knives, all moving toward him. These were not strangers. These were not enemies. These were his men. Senators he had promoted, generals he had trusted, friends he had eaten with the night before. Now, they were stabbing him. He tried to fight. He covered his head with his toga. He swung at the men closest to him. But there were too many. The blades kept coming. 1, 5, 10, 15, 20, 23 wounds. He fell at the base of a statue. Blood pooled on the marble floor. The most powerful man in the world, the general who had never lost a war, was dying at the feet of his oldest enemy. 60 men stood over his body. 60 men who had just changed history. They thought they were heroes. They thought Rome would thank them. They were wrong. Within 2 years, every single one of them would be dead, hunted, tortured, executed, driven to suicide. The general who conquered the world was gone. The men who killed him would soon follow. To understand why 60 men wanted him dead, you have to understand who he was. His name was Gaius Julius Caesar, and he was not just a general. He was the general, the one Rome talked about for generations, the one his enemies had nightmares about, the one who turned farmers into killers and turned killers into legends. By the time he died, he had conquered more land than any Roman before him. He had fought in battles that should have killed him dozens of times. He had built an army so loyal that his soldiers would march into hell if he asked them to. He was 55 years old when they stabbed him. He had been winning wars for almost 30 of those years. Caesar was born in 100 BC into a noble family, but noble did not mean rich. His family had a famous name, but not much money. They were not among the powerful senators who controlled Rome. They were outsiders looking in. Caesar wanted in. From a young age, he was ambitious, dangerously ambitious. He wanted power. He wanted glory. He wanted his name to be remembered forever. Rome in those days was a republic. There was no king. Instead, the Senate, a group of wealthy old men, made the decisions. 2 consuls were elected each year to lead the government. Power was supposed to be shared. But power is never really shared. The men with the most money and the most soldiers made the rules. Everyone else followed. Caesar understood this. He understood that in Rome, military victory was the path to political power. If you conquered land, you got rich. If you got rich, you could buy influence. If you had influence, you could rule. So he became a soldier. His first real command came in his late 30s. In 58 BC, Caesar was appointed governor of Gaul. Gaul was the region north of Italy, roughly modern-day France, Belgium, and parts of Germany and Switzerland. Rome controlled the southern part. The rest was wild, filled with tribes, filled with warriors, filled with people who did not want to be Roman. Caesar was supposed to keep the peace, defend the borders, nothing too ambitious. He had other plans. Within a year, he launched an invasion. He did not ask permission from the Senate. He did not wait for approval. He saw an opportunity, and he took it. The Gallic Wars had begun. For the next 8 years, Caesar fought across Gaul. He faced tribes that outnumbered him. He faced warriors who had been fighting since childhood. He faced terrain that should have been impossible to cross. He won anyway. The numbers are hard to believe. Ancient sources say Caesar fought against 3 million enemies over the course of the wars. They say he killed 1 million of them. They say he captured another million and sold them into slavery. These numbers are probably exaggerated. Roman generals like to inflate their victories, but even if the real numbers were half as large, it was still one of the bloodiest conquests in history. Caesar did not just defeat the Gauls, he crushed them. Tribe after tribe fell, village after village burned, entire peoples were wiped out or scattered. He was not fighting for defense, he was fighting for glory, and he got it. The stories from the Gallic Wars made Caesar a legend. He crossed the Rhine River into Germania, something no Roman army had ever done. He built a wooden bridge in just 10 days, marched his army across, burned some villages, and marched back. The bridge was torn down behind him. The message was clear. Rome could go anywhere, Rome could reach anyone. Then he went even further. In 55 BC and again in 54 BC, Caesar invaded Britain. Britain was the edge of the known world. Romans believed the ocean beyond it led to nothing, just endless water and darkness. No one had ever taken an army there. Caesar did. He loaded his soldiers onto ships. He crossed the Channel. He landed on beaches filled with British warriors. He fought his way inland. The invasions did not conquer Britain. That would come later, under other emperors. But that was not the point. The point was that Caesar went where no Roman had gone before. He was not just a general now. He was an explorer, a conqueror of the unknown. Back in Rome, people could not stop talking about him. But Caesar's greatest strength was not his tactics. It was not his bravery. It was not even his luck, though he had plenty of that. His greatest strength was his men. Caesar's soldiers loved him. This sounds simple. It was not. Roman soldiers were tough. They had seen bad generals before. Men who got them killed for no reason. Men who took all the glory and gave them nothing. Men who treated them like tools instead of people. Caesar was different. He remembered names. He knew which soldiers had fought well in which battles. He promoted men based on skill, not connections. He shared the hardships of the campaign, sleeping on the ground, eating the same food, marching the same miles. When his soldiers won a battle, he rewarded them. Gold, land, slaves. He made them rich. When they were in danger, he fought beside them. He did not command from the back. He rode into the fight. He took risks. He bled with them. There is a story from the Gallic Wars. Caesar's army was surrounded. The men were exhausted. Morale was breaking. Some soldiers were ready to run. Caesar grabbed a shield from a nearby soldier. He pushed his way to the front line. He stood where the fighting was thickest. "If you want to run," he shouted, "you will have to leave your general behind." No one ran. They fought. They won. That was the kind of leader Caesar was, the kind who made men believe they could not lose. By 50 BC, the Gallic Wars were over. Caesar had conquered all of Gaul. He had added a massive territory to the Roman Republic. He had captured enough slaves and gold to make himself one of the richest men in Rome. He had also built an army of 50,000 veterans who would die for him. And that was the problem. Back in Rome, the Senate was getting nervous. Caesar had been gone for 8 years. In that time, he had become too powerful, too popular, too dangerous. The Senate was controlled by men who did not like Caesar. Some were jealous of his success. Some were afraid he would use his army to take over Rome. Some simply hated him because he was not one of them. He was an outsider who had risen too high. The leader of this group was a man named Pompey. Pompey had once been Caesar's ally. They had been friends. They had been family. Pompey had married Caesar's daughter Julia, but Julia died in childbirth. The bond between the two men died with her. Now Pompey was afraid. Caesar's victories had made him a hero. If Caesar returned to Rome with his army, he could take control. Pompey would lose everything. So Pompey made a deal with the Senate. They would order Caesar to give up his command and return to Rome as a private citizen. If he refused, he would be declared an enemy of the state. The trap was set. In January of 49 BC, Caesar received the order. Disband your army. Come home. Face the Senate. Caesar knew what this meant. If he returned without his soldiers, his enemies would destroy him. They would put him on trial. They would take his money, his power, his life. He had two choices: obey the law and die, or break the law and fight. There was a river called the Rubicon. It was small, shallow, unimportant, but it marked the boundary between Gaul and Italy. Roman law said no general could bring his army across that river without permission from the Senate. To cross it with soldiers was treason. It was a declaration of war. On January 10th, 49 BC, Caesar stood at the edge of the Rubicon. His officers waited. His soldiers waited. History waited. Caesar looked at the water. He knew what crossing meant. There would be no going back. It would be victory or death. He said 4 words. Alea iacta est. The die is cast. He stepped into the river. His army followed. The civil war had begun. The war lasted 4 years. Caesar chased Pompey across Italy. Pompey fled to Greece. Caesar followed. At the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BC, the two armies finally met. Pompey had more soldiers. He had the Senate's support. He had every advantage. Caesar won anyway. Pompey escaped. He sailed to Egypt, hoping to find shelter. The Egyptian pharaoh had other ideas. He did not want to make an enemy of Caesar, so he had Pompey murdered. When Caesar arrived in Egypt, they presented him with Pompey's severed head. Caesar reportedly wept. They had been enemies at the end, but they had also been friends once, family once. Now Pompey was just a head in a basket. Caesar did not go home after Pompey died. He stayed in Egypt. He got involved in a civil war there. He met a young queen named Cleopatra. He made her the ruler of Egypt. Some say he loved her. Some say it was politics. Probably both. Then he went to Asia Minor and defeated a king named Pharnaces. The battle was so quick and so easy that Caesar sent a message back to Rome with just 3 words. Veni, vidi, vici. I came. I saw. I conquered. He said more with 3 words than most men say in a lifetime. By 45 BC, the civil war was over. All of Caesar's enemies were dead or defeated. He returned to Rome as the most powerful man in the world. The Senate had no choice. They named him dictator. Not dictator for a year. Not dictator for 10 years. Dictator for life. Caesar was now king in everything but name. For the next year, Caesar ruled Rome. He passed laws. He reformed the calendar, the foundation of the one we still use today. He gave land to poor citizens. He offered citizenship to people in the provinces. He planned massive construction projects. He also filled the Senate with his own supporters. He put his allies in powerful positions. He made it clear that his word was law. Some people loved him for this. He was fixing problems that the old Senate had ignored for decades. Some people hated him for this. They believed Rome was supposed to be a republic. No one man should have this much power. The men who hated him started to talk. Then they started to plan. Caesar knew he had enemies. He was not stupid. He had survived 30 years of war. He had outmaneuvered every opponent the Senate had thrown at him. He knew how Roman politics worked, but he made a choice. He dismissed his bodyguards. He walked through Rome without protection. He attended Senate meetings alone. People warned him. Friends told him there were plots against his life. A soothsayer famously told him to beware the Ides of March, the 15th day of the month. Caesar ignored them all. Some historians think he was arrogant. He believed no one would dare touch him. Some think he was tired. He had been fighting for 30 years. Maybe he did not care anymore. Some think he was testing the gods, seeing how far his luck would stretch. Whatever the reason, he did not protect himself, and 60 men were counting on that. The men who killed Caesar were not strangers. They were not foreign enemies. They were not assassins hired from the shadows. They were not criminals or madmen. They were senators, generals, nobles, men who had eaten dinner at Caesar's table, men who had fought in his wars, men who owed their careers to him. Some of them were his friends. That is what made the betrayal so complete. The conspiracy began with a man named Gaius Cassius Longinus. Cassius was a senator and a military commander. He had fought for Pompey during the civil war. When Pompey lost, Cassius surrendered to Caesar. Caesar forgave him. That was Caesar's way. He believed in mercy. He believed that forgiving his enemies would turn them into allies. It did not work on Cassius. Cassius never forgot that he had lost. He never forgot that he had been forced to kneel. He smiled at Caesar in public. He thanked him for his mercy. But inside, he was burning. Cassius was ambitious. He believed he deserved more power than he had. He watched Caesar accumulate titles and honors, and he grew bitter. Why should one man have everything? Why should the rest of them bow and scrape? He started talking to other senators, quietly, carefully, testing the waters. Were there others who felt the same way? Others who believed Caesar had gone too far? Others who might be willing to do something about it? There were. The conspiracy grew slowly. Cassius recruited men one by one. He looked for senators who had grievances against Caesar. Some were jealous of his power. Some were afraid of what he might do next. Some genuinely believed that the Roman Republic was dying, and that Caesar was the one killing it. Within a few months, Cassius had gathered nearly 60 conspirators, 60 senators, 60 knives, all pointed at one man. But Cassius knew that 60 senators were not enough. He needed something else. He needed a name that would make the assassination look noble instead of criminal. He needed Brutus. Marcus Junius Brutus was different from the other conspirators. He was not bitter like Cassius. He was not hungry for power. He was not nursing old grudges. Brutus was a philosopher, an idealist, a man who genuinely believed in the Roman Republic and its traditions. His family had a famous history. According to legend, his ancestor Lucius Junius Brutus had overthrown the last king of Rome 500 years earlier. He had helped create the Republic. The Brutus family name was synonymous with liberty. Marcus Brutus carried that weight every day of his life. He also carried something else. Caesar loved him. The relationship between Caesar and Brutus was complicated. Caesar had been close to Brutus's mother, Servilia. Some historians believe they were lovers. Some believe Caesar might have been Brutus's real father. The dates make it unlikely, but the rumor persisted. Whether or not they were blood relatives, Caesar treated Brutus like a son. During the Civil War, Brutus had fought for Pompey, against Caesar. When Pompey lost, Caesar did not punish Brutus. He did not execute him. He did not even demote him. He forgave him immediately. Caesar gave Brutus power. He made him governor of Gaul. He promised him the consulship, the highest office in Rome. He trusted him completely. Brutus knew all of this. He knew that Caesar had shown him nothing but kindness, and still, he was tempted. Cassius worked on Brutus for months. He appealed to his philosophy. He talked about the Republic. He talked about tyranny. He talked about what Caesar was becoming. "You carry the name Brutus," Cassius said. "Your ancestor freed Rome from a king. Now there is a new king. What will you do?" Brutus hesitated. He did not want to betray Caesar. He genuinely cared for him, but he cared about Rome more. At least, that is what he told himself. There were signs, small things that pushed Brutus toward the conspiracy. Someone wrote messages on the statue of his ancestor. "You are no Brutus," the messages said. "You are sleeping while Rome dies." Someone threw notes through his window. "Wake up, Brutus. Rome needs you." Some historians believe Cassius arranged all of this, a psychological campaign to guilt Brutus into action. It worked. Brutus joined the conspiracy, and everything changed. With Brutus on their side, the conspirators had legitimacy. This was no longer a group of bitter losers trying to kill the man who beat them. This was a noble cause, a fight for the Republic, a fight against tyranny. That is what they told themselves. That is what they told each other. The conspirators met in secret. They gathered at each other's houses. They spoke in whispers. They made plans. Some wanted to kill Mark Antony too. Antony was Caesar's right hand. He was a powerful general, skilled politician, and fiercely loyal. If Caesar died, Antony would come for revenge. Brutus refused. "We are not murderers," he said. "We are liberators. We kill only the tyrant. If we start killing everyone around him, we become no better than him." It was a noble sentiment. It was also a terrible mistake. The conspirators chose their date, March 15th, 44 BC. The Ides of March. There would be a Senate meeting that day. Caesar would attend. He would be surrounded by senators, including the 60 who wanted him dead. He would not bring guards into the Senate chamber. That was tradition. The Senate was sacred ground. He would be alone, unprotected, surrounded by knives. But the conspirators had a problem. They needed Caesar to actually show up. In the days before the Ides, Caesar was not feeling well. He was 55 years old. His body was breaking down after decades of war. He suffered from headaches. Some historians believe he had epilepsy. His wife Calpurnia had been having nightmares. She dreamed of Caesar covered in blood. She dreamed of their house collapsing. She begged him not to go to the Senate. Caesar was superstitious. The omens were bad. A soothsayer had warned him about the Ides of March. Animals sacrificed that morning had missing organs. A terrible sign. On the morning of March 15th, Caesar decided to stay home. The conspirators panicked. If Caesar did not come, the plan would fail. They could not keep 60 men quiet forever. Someone would talk. Someone would betray them. They needed to get Caesar to the Senate. They sent the one man Caesar would listen to. They sent Decimus. Decimus Junius Brutus Albinus was not the same person as Marcus Brutus. The two men shared a family name, but came from different branches. History remembers Marcus Brutus as the famous one, but Decimus was the one who truly betrayed Caesar. Decimus was Caesar's friend, his real friend. He had served under Caesar for years. He had commanded fleets. He had won battles. In Gaul, he was one of Caesar's most trusted generals. Caesar loved Decimus like a brother. He had put Decimus in his will. When Caesar died, Decimus was supposed to inherit a portion of his fortune. That is how close they were. And Decimus used that closeness to kill him. On the morning of March 15th, Decimus went to Caesar's house. Caesar told him about the bad omens, the nightmares, the warnings. He said he was not going to the Senate. Decimus laughed. "You are Caesar," he said. "You have conquered nations. You have defeated every enemy. And now you are afraid of dreams." He told Caesar the Senate was waiting. They were going to offer him a new title. They were going to declare him king of all Roman territories outside Italy. This was a lie, but Caesar did not know that. Decimus kept pushing. What will people say? That Caesar stayed home because his wife had a nightmare? Your enemies will laugh at you. They will say you have grown weak. Caesar hesitated. Then he stood up. "You are right," he said. "Let us go." Decimus walked Caesar out of his house. He walked him through the streets of Rome. He walked him into the Senate chamber. He walked him to his death. The Senate met in a building called the Theatre of Pompey. It was a temporary location. The usual Senate house was being rebuilt. So the senators gathered in the large hall attached to Pompey's theatre, the building named after Caesar's old enemy. Caesar would die at the feet of Pompey's statue. The universe has a cruel sense of irony. Caesar entered the chamber. Senators rose to greet him. They bowed. They smiled. They showed respect. 60 of them had knives hidden in their togas. Mark Antony was outside. He had walked with Caesar to the theatre, but stopped at the entrance. A senator named Trebonius was talking to him, distracting him, keeping him away from the chamber. Trebonius was one of the conspirators. His job was simple: keep Antony busy, make sure he could not save Caesar. Inside the chamber, the plan began to unfold. A senator named Simba approached Caesar. He had a request. He wanted his exiled brother to be pardoned. Caesar said no. Simba kept pushing. He grabbed Caesar's toga. He pulled at it. This was the signal. Casca was standing behind Caesar. He was supposed to strike first. He had volunteered for the job. He was ready. But when the moment came, his hand shook. He stabbed at Caesar's neck. The blade sliced across his shoulder instead. A wound, but not a fatal one. Caesar spun around. He grabbed Casca's arm. He was still strong, still a fighter. 30 years of war had made him hard. "Casca, you villain! What are you doing?" For a moment, it seemed like Caesar might fight his way out. Then the other knives came. The conspirators swarmed him. One blade from the left, another from the right, another from behind. Caesar tried to defend himself. He twisted, he turned, he pushed men away, but there were too many. The blades kept coming. His toga was soaked with blood. His arms were covered in cuts, defensive wounds, trying to block the knives. He stumbled. He fell against the statue of Pompey, his old enemy, looking down at him. The men kept stabbing. Then he saw Brutus. Brutus was standing in front of him, knife in hand, blood on the blade. Their eyes met. The ancient historians say Caesar spoke his last words at this moment. Some say he said, "Kai su, teknon," Greek for "you too, my child." Others say he said nothing, that he simply pulled his toga over his head and let the blades finish him. We will never know for certain. What we know is this: Brutus stabbed him. The man Caesar loved like a son drove a knife into his body, and Caesar stopped fighting. He fell at the base of Pompey's statue. 23 wounds, most of them shallow. Only one was fatal. A stab to the chest that pierced his heart. The greatest general in Roman history was dead. He was 55 years old. He had conquered Gaul. He had crossed the Rubicon. He had defeated Pompey. He had ruled Rome. Now he was bleeding on a marble floor, surrounded by 60 men who thought they had just saved the Republic. The conspirators stood over the body. Some were exhilarated. They had done it. They had killed the tyrant. Brutus raised his bloody knife in the air. "Liberty!" he shouted. "The tyrant is dead!" The senators, who were not part of the conspiracy, ran. They fled the building. They scattered into the streets. The conspirators walked out of the theatre. Their togas were stained with blood. Their knives were still in their hands. They marched toward the Forum. They were going to announce to the people of Rome what they had done. They expected cheering. They expected gratitude. They expected to be heroes. They were wrong. The streets were empty. The people had heard the news and locked themselves inside. No one was celebrating. No one was thanking them. Rome was in shock, and one man was already planning revenge. Mark Antony heard the screams from outside the building. He tried to push past Trebonius, tried to get inside, but by the time he reached the chamber, it was over. Caesar was dead. Antony looked at the body, looked at the blood, looked at the 60 men standing around with knives in their hands. He was next. He knew it. They would kill him too. He ran. Antony fled across Rome. He barricaded himself in his house. He gathered soldiers. He waited for the assassins to come for him. They never came. Brutus had refused to kill Antony. He had called it unnecessary, noble, principled. It was the mistake that would destroy them all. The conspirators marched to the Forum. They were covered in blood, Caesar's blood. They held their knives in the air like trophies. "Liberty!" Brutus shouted. "We have freed Rome from the tyrant!" The people stared. No one cheered. No one celebrated. The streets were quiet, confused, afraid. This was not the reaction the conspirators expected. They thought Rome would thank them. They thought the people would carry them on their shoulders. Instead, shopkeepers closed their doors. Citizens hurried home. The Forum emptied. Rome did not feel liberated. Rome felt like it was about to explode. For the next 2 days, the city held its breath. The conspirators controlled the capital. They had soldiers. They had senators. They had the moral high ground, or so they believed. But they did not have the people, and they did not have Mark Antony. Antony was a survivor. He had been Caesar's right hand for years. He was a general, a politician, a man who understood power better than any philosopher ever could. He knew the conspirators had made a mistake by letting him live. Now he was going to make them pay for it. But he could not attack them directly. Not yet. They had too many soldiers, too many allies in the Senate. He needed to turn the people against them first. He needed Caesar's funeral. The funeral was held a few days after the assassination. Thousands of Romans gathered in the Forum. They wanted to see their leader one last time. They wanted to understand what had happened. Antony gave the eulogy. It was the speech of his life. He started slowly, carefully. He did not attack the conspirators directly. That would have been too obvious. Instead, he praised them. Brutus says Caesar was ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man. He repeated this line again and again. Each time, it sounded more like an accusation. Then he read Caesar's will. Caesar had left money to every Roman citizen. He had given his private gardens to the public. He had treated the people like family. "This was your tyrant," Antony said. "This was the man they killed to save you from." The crowd began to stir. Antony kept going. He pointed to Caesar's body. He held up the bloody toga. He showed them the rips where the knives had gone in. "Here is where Cassius stabbed him. Here is where Casca struck. And here is where Brutus drove his blade." The crowd was not stirring anymore. They were screaming. The mob exploded. They grabbed torches. They grabbed weapons. They flooded into the streets looking for the assassins. They found a man named Cinna, a poet. He had the same name as one of the conspirators, Cinna the senator. "I am Cinna the poet," he screamed. "Not Cinna the conspirator." The mob did not care. They beat him to death anyway. The conspirators fled Rome that night. They had come to the funeral, expecting to be honored. They left the city running for their lives. Brutus went east. Cassius went east. They gathered their supporters and prepared for war. The men who had killed Caesar to save the Republic were now enemies of the state. The hunt had begun. Antony was not alone in seeking revenge. Caesar had named an heir in his will, a 19-year-old boy named Gaius Octavius. Octavius was Caesar's grandnephew. Caesar had adopted him as his son. When Caesar died, Octavius inherited his name, his fortune, and his legacy. He also inherited his enemies. Octavius traveled to Rome. He was young, inexperienced. No one expected much from him. They were wrong. Octavius was cold, calculating, patient. He did not have Caesar's warmth or Antony's charisma, but he had something more dangerous. He had ambition without limits, and he wanted every single one of Caesar's killers dead. At first, Octavius and Antony were rivals. They both claimed to be Caesar's true successor. They both wanted power. They almost went to war with each other. But they had a common enemy. Brutus and Cassius had raised an army in the east. They had gathered the remaining forces loyal to the old republic. They were coming back to fight. Octavius and Antony made a deal. They would destroy the assassins first. Then they would figure out who ruled Rome. Together with a general named Lepidus, they formed the second triumvirate, 3 men sharing power. Their first order of business was revenge. The triumvirate published a list. It was called the Prescription. It contained the names of everyone who would die. The assassins were on the list. Their allies were on the list. Their families were on the list. Anyone who helped them would die. Anyone who hid them would die. Anyone who failed to report them would die. Roman soldiers fanned out across the empire. They were hunting senators, hunting generals, hunting the 60 men who had killed Caesar. One by one, they found them. The first major conspirator to die was Trebonius. Trebonius was the man who had distracted Mark Antony outside the Senate chamber. He had kept Antony busy while the others stabbed Caesar. He fled to Asia Minor after the assassination. He thought he was safe. He was wrong. A general named Dolabella caught him. Dolabella was supposed to be on the conspirators' side. He had been appointed to a command by the Senate, but Dolabella switched sides. He wanted to prove his loyalty to Antony and Octavius. He proved it with Trebonius. Dolabella captured Trebonius in the city of Smyrna. He did not give him a quick death. The soldiers tortured Trebonius for days. They beat him. They whipped him. They broke his body piece by piece. When they finally killed him, they cut off his head. But that was not enough. The soldiers used his head as a ball. They kicked it through the streets. They threw it back and forth. They made a game of it. Then they sent what was left to Antony. Trebonius had kept Antony away from the Senate chamber. Now Antony had his revenge. The first conspirator was dead. Decimus was next. Decimus, the man who had convinced Caesar to go to the Senate that morning. The man who had walked his friend to his death. After the assassination, Decimus fled north. He had been given command of an army in Gaul. He thought his soldiers would protect him. They did not. When the triumvirate declared him an enemy of the state, his soldiers abandoned him. One by one, they deserted. No one wanted to die for a man who had betrayed Caesar. Decimus tried to escape. He headed for the Alps. He planned to cross the mountains and disappear into the wilderness. He never made it. A Gallic chieftain named Camillus captured him. Decimus begged for his life. He offered money. He offered promises. Camillus sent a message to Antony. What should he do with the prisoner? The answer came back quickly. Kill him. Decimus was beheaded. The man who had betrayed Caesar was himself betrayed. He had trusted the Gallic chieftain. The chieftain handed him over to his enemies. There is a pattern here. The betrayers kept getting betrayed. Decimus had been closer to Caesar than almost anyone. He was named in Caesar's will. He was supposed to inherit a fortune. Instead, his head was sent to Rome. 2 conspirators down, 58 to go. By 42 BC, most of the conspirators had fled east. Brutus and Cassius had gathered a massive army. They had more than 80,000 soldiers. They controlled the wealthy provinces of Greece and Asia Minor. They were ready for war. Antony and Octavius came to meet them. The 2 armies faced each other near a town called Philippi in northern Greece. This was it, the final battle. The assassins versus the avengers. Everything would be decided here. The Battle of Philippi was actually 2 battles. The first battle happened in early October. Antony's forces attacked Cassius's camp. They broke through the defenses. They slaughtered the soldiers inside. Cassius saw the attack from a nearby hill. He watched his camp burn. He watched his men die. But his eyesight was bad. He could not see clearly. He could only see shapes and shadows. He saw a group of horsemen riding toward him. He thought they were enemies. He thought his army had been destroyed. He ordered his servant to kill him. "I would rather die than be captured," he said. The servant obeyed. He drove a sword through Cassius. Cassius fell. The mastermind of the assassination was dead, but the horsemen were not enemies. They were his own men. They were coming to tell him that Brutus had won on the other side of the battlefield. Brutus had actually defeated Octavius. The battle was not lost, it was a draw. Cassius had killed himself for nothing. When the horsemen arrived, they found his body. The leader of the group was a man named Titinius, one of Cassius's closest friends. Titinius looked at the body. He understood what had happened. Cassius had seen the horsemen and thought they were enemies. "I brought you victory," Titinius whispered, "and you died thinking we had lost." He took Cassius's sword and killed himself on the spot. 2 men dead, because of a misunderstanding, because of bad eyesight. Brutus buried Cassius quietly. He could not mourn properly. There was still a war to fight. Antony and Octavius were regrouping. 3 weeks later, the second battle began. This time, Brutus was alone. He had no Cassius to help him plan. He had no partner to share the burden. He made mistakes. He attacked when he should have waited. He let his soldiers break formation. He lost control of the battle. By the end of the day, his army was destroyed. The night before the battle, Brutus had seen something. According to the ancient historians, he was sitting alone in his tent when a figure appeared. The figure was pale, hollow, wrong. "Who are you?" Brutus asked. The figure answered, "I am your evil spirit. You will see me at Philippi." Then it vanished. Brutus told his friends about the vision. Some said it was a dream. Some said it was exhaustion playing tricks on his mind. But Brutus believed it was Caesar. Caesar had come back. Caesar was watching. After the second battle, Brutus ran. His army was gone. His cause was lost. Everything he had fought for was dead. He found a quiet spot on a hillside. A few loyal friends were with him. He asked one of them, a man named Strato, to hold his sword. "You were always a good friend," Brutus said. "Will you help me now?" Strato nodded. He held the sword steady. The blade pointed at Brutus's chest. Brutus ran onto the sword. His last words, according to the historians, were Greek. "O wretched virtue, you were only a word, and yet I worshipped you as if you were real. Now I see you were just the slave of fortune." He had killed Caesar to save the Republic. He had believed in liberty. He had believed in justice. Now he was dying in a field in Greece, and the Republic was dying with him. When Antony found Brutus's body, he did something strange. He covered it with his own purple cloak. He ordered a proper burial. Antony had respected Brutus, not the other conspirators. He hated them, but Brutus was different. Brutus had truly believed in what he was doing. "This was the noblest Roman of them all," Antony said. "The other conspirators killed Caesar out of jealousy. Only Brutus did it for the good of Rome." It was a strange compliment for an enemy, but Brutus was still dead, and so was his cause. The other conspirators died in the weeks and months that followed. Casca, the man who struck the first blow, died at Philippi. Some say he killed himself. Some say he fell in battle. Either way, he did not survive the day. Simba, the man who grabbed Caesar's toga as the signal, also died at Philippi. His exact fate is unknown, but he never returned to Rome. Dozens of others fell in the battle or were captured afterward. Those who were captured were executed. Those who escaped were hunted. One by one, they all died. Some conspirators lasted a little longer. A few escaped the immediate aftermath. They hid in distant provinces. They changed their names. They tried to disappear. It did not work. Octavius was patient. He had a long memory. He tracked down every man who had touched Caesar. Years later, when Octavius had become Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, he was still hunting the assassins. An old man would be found living quietly in some corner of the empire. Soldiers would arrive. They would drag him out. "You were there," they would say. "You were in the Senate chamber. You stabbed the dictator." Then they would kill him. Augustus never forgave. Augustus never forgot. Within 2 years of Caesar's death, almost every conspirator was dead. 60 men had plotted together. 60 men had stabbed their leader. 60 men had thought they were saving the Republic. None of them survived. Tortured, beheaded, stabbed, driven to suicide. They died in battle. They died in hiding. They died running. Not one of them lived to see old age in Rome. Not one of them got what they wanted. The Republic they killed for was gone. In its place stood an empire, an emperor, a system even more powerful than anything Caesar had built. They did not save Rome. They destroyed it. The assassins had one goal: save the Republic. They believed Caesar was destroying everything Rome stood for. They believed he was turning himself into a king. They believed that killing him would restore the old ways, the Senate, the elections, the balance of power. They were wrong about everything. After Philippi, there was no one left to fight for the Republic. The assassins were dead. Their armies were scattered. Their supporters were hunted down and executed. Antony and Octavius divided the Roman world between themselves. Antony took the east. Octavius took the west. Lepidus, the third member of the triumvirate, was pushed aside. He had never been important anyway. For a while, there was peace. Then Antony made a mistake. Antony fell in love with Cleopatra. She was the queen of Egypt. She had been Caesar's lover years before. Now she became Antony's. He abandoned his duties in Rome. He spent years in Egypt with her. He gave Roman territories to her children. He acted more like an Egyptian king than a Roman general. Octavius used this against him. He told the Roman people that Antony had betrayed them. He said Antony was under the spell of a foreign queen. He said Antony wanted to move the capital from Rome to Alexandria. Some of it was true. Some of it was propaganda. It did not matter. Rome turned against Antony. In 31 BC, the final war began. Octavius sailed east with his fleet. He met Antony and Cleopatra at a place called Actium, off the coast of Greece. The battle was short. Cleopatra's ships fled in the middle of the fighting. Antony followed her. His fleet was left behind, leaderless, confused. Octavius destroyed them. Antony and Cleopatra retreated to Egypt. They knew it was over. Octavius was coming. There was no army left to stop him. In 30 BC, Octavius arrived at the gates of Alexandria. Antony tried to fight. He failed. His remaining soldiers deserted him. He had nothing left. He fell on his sword. But the wound was not immediately fatal. He was carried to Cleopatra's palace, bleeding. He died in her arms. Cleopatra tried to negotiate with Octavius. She offered him money. She offered him alliances. She offered him anything he wanted. Octavius wanted only one thing: to parade her through the streets of Rome as a captive, a trophy, proof of his complete victory. Cleopatra refused to be humiliated. She locked herself in her chamber. According to legend, she pressed a poisonous snake to her chest. An asp. Its venom killed her within hours. She was 39 years old. Egypt became a Roman province. The last of Caesar's lovers was dead. The last of his rivals was dead. Octavius stood alone. In 27 BC, the Senate gave Octavius a new name, Augustus. It meant the revered one. It meant he was more than a man. It meant he was almost a god. Augustus became the first emperor of Rome. Not a dictator, not a consul, an emperor. The Republic was officially dead. Think about what this means. The assassins killed Caesar because they feared he would become a king. By killing him, they started a civil war. The civil war destroyed the Senate's power. It wiped out the old families. It eliminated everyone who might have restored the Republic. When the war ended, Octavius was the only one left standing. He took more power than Caesar ever had. He ruled for over 40 years. He built a system that lasted for centuries. The assassins did not prevent tyranny. They created it. Augustus never forgot what happened to Caesar. He learned from his adopted father's mistakes. Caesar had been merciful. He had forgiven his enemies. He had walked through Rome without guards. Augustus was not merciful. He crushed his enemies completely. He never forgave anyone who threatened him. He surrounded himself with soldiers at all times. Caesar trusted too much. Augustus trusted no one. That is why Augustus died in his bed at 75 years old. That is why no one ever stabbed him. The Roman Empire lasted for 500 years in the West. It lasted for another 1,000 years in the East as the Byzantine Empire. All of it. The emperors, the legions, the roads, the laws, all of it began with Augustus. And Augustus began with Caesar's death. The 60 men who stabbed Caesar thought they were ending something. They were starting something bigger than they could have ever imagined. Caesar became a god. This is not a metaphor. The Romans literally made him a god. After his death, a comet appeared in the sky. It was visible for 7 days. The people of Rome believed it was Caesar's soul rising to heaven. Augustus built a temple to him. Priests made sacrifices in his name. For centuries, Romans worshipped Divus Julius, The divine Julius. The man who was stabbed 23 times became immortal. History remembers the assassins too, but not the way they wanted. Brutus wanted to be remembered as a liberator. Instead, he became a symbol of betrayal. Dante put him in the lowest circle of hell, alongside Judas Iscariot. He is frozen in ice, being chewed by Satan for eternity. Cassius is there too, right next to Brutus. Two traitors, punished forever. That is their legacy. Not liberty, not honor, treachery. And what about Caesar? His name became a title. The emperors, who came after Augustus, called themselves Caesar. The word spread across languages and centuries. The German Kaiser comes from Caesar. The Russian Tsar comes from Caesar. 2,000 years later, his name still means power. The Senate chamber was cleaned after the assassination. The blood was washed away. The marble was scrubbed. Within days, you could not tell that anything had happened there. But Rome remembered. The spot where Caesar fell became sacred. People left flowers there. They left offerings. They wept. They did not weep for the other senators. They did not build temples to Brutus or Cassius. They wept for the general. Brutus is a footnote. Cassius is a footnote. The 60 senators who thought they were saving Rome are dust. Caesar is eternal. If you walk through Rome today, you can visit the spot where he died. The theatre of Pompey is gone. A different building stands there now. But historians know the location. Tour guides point to it. Here, they say, this is where it happened. 2,000 years later, people still come to see where the general fell. 2,000 years later, we still remember his name. They stabbed him 23 times. They thought it was the end. It was just the beginning. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment below. Tell me, which assassin's death was the most fitting? Did they deserve what happened to them? Would Rome have been better off if Caesar had lived? Subscribe and turn on notifications if you want more stories like this.